Well, finally, we get to the barn buck, one of my favorite hunts of the year, because there's just so much that goes into this deer from a history standpoint, establishing almost a relationship with the deer, basically, and then into all of the habitat improvements that went into this specific area that we ended up harvesting him in.
I think it's one of those things that you cannot sit and be loyal and I guess conservative when you have a really good spot and you've got history, which he's 8.5 years old, and say, we're not going to do anything better to this spot. We're going to leave it alone. Mistake number one, right?
Yeah.
You've always got to stay ahead of Mother Nature because she's always changing.
If you're not working to improve, you're always degrading.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's a chance that even though he's been there for 3-4 years in a row, that doesn't mean he's not going to leave.
Yeah.
No doubt.
So we've got to make sure we're staying on top of the game, doing the timber stand improvements, keeping the food plot tight, all those type of things, because you just never know. And so most people would just sit and go, you know what, it's good enough. He's there.
Yeah.
He's consistent. We're just going to get him at some point.
It's a growing trend through all the videos. We're always trying to improve. We're always tweaking the sets, making them better. If they're good, we make them great. If they're okay, we make them good until we figure out how to make them great. It's just constantly figuring out whether we need to change the hunting strategy or the habitat, or sometimes both, to make it just better and better and better. Because how many times when I grew up hunting, there was spots on the farm where it was like, whoever hunts that spot, they're in the best spot. Like, everyone else is gar holes.
Yeah.
And then when you buy a farm, you're like, okay, that's the spot, and all these others I haven't figured out yet. So you're always trying to make every set where it's like, that's the spot, to where you love that feeling going, doesn't matter. Like, I got 6 to 10 spots where if I go in there, I'm expecting to kill them. Like, I'm expecting. If I don't kill them, I'm dang sure going to see them.
Yeah, and in this specific situation, we had hunted this deer in years prior.
Okay.
And we had a lot of trail cam pictures, but during the season, a lot of times it would end up that they were after dark.
Yeah.
So although he was there and he was living there, how killable was he really? He didn't seem to be.
Gotcha.
We have tried and didn't have much luck. So in this situation, I think for sure the improvements that we went in and made ended up being his demise. We were holding him. He basically spent his entire life on our farm, and as he got older, his core area shrunk, obviously.
Yeah.
But
And I think about this setup, when you look at it on an Onyx aerial, immediately our eyes, your guys' eyes, are drawn to this ridge that's just offset from the actual tillable field where you can leave standing grain or you can plant the food plot. It's just a large prominent ridge above a big creek system, kind of with a bigger bluff. So naturally, the wind's going to be consistent. They're going to be able to use that terrain. If anything, let's say danger-wise, comes from any direction, they can bail off those points of those ridges and put terrain in between them and danger. So naturally, they're going to be drawn to a ridge like that to bed. And so, sure, someone could have gone in there, less of standing grain in the tillable field, put the blind in there and known, hey, they're going to come from that direction and work back out. But why leave it like that? Why not just say, I'm going to put great cover on that ridge too, attract more, and allow them to really work in and out of that one drain that comes up basically right where you made the shot, really pinches them off that ridge and right into the blind scenario. And it's, probably 30, 40 yards of a pinch between the blind and where that drain comes in, and they work beautifully off that ridge. It's probably been 4 years since we all did some bedding cuts and timber work in there, but 4
years on the bedding cuts, 2 years on the TSI.
Right.
Yeah.
But now it's had time to mature and super high stem count, and they're obviously doing it.
Well, what's interesting is because, we went after him in 22 and 21, and he beat us. It's either we were there and he wasn't, or we would just we left and he got there right at dark. There's a few of those times that happened, and so we made the spot better. His consistency on the plot started increasing as we changed the habitat.
Yeah,
and then Casey played off of that with the reveal cameras intel, and we had some great cold fronts, and it was basically Christmas time.
yeah, I'm getting goosebumps right now just even thinking about the front. I mean, it was right on dead on Christmas. I looked at my wife and said, I have got to go. We got to figure this out. Please don't leave me alone. But and
please be here when I get back. With this buck.
She came along with.
Okay,
so,
good.
So,
Don't
He
leave
calls me and says, and I said, what?
Yeah.
I said, there's no way. And then he ended up self-filming. It all came together. But it's one of those things that the reveal cameras were key in this whole thing. A huge cold front. He played on both information and took advantage on it and went all in when the time was right.
Specifically, where was the reveal located? How close to the food source versus the bedding was that camera to be able to get that consistent intel?
So the food plot wraps around in kind of a small horseshoe, kind of away from the blind, and then it funnels off towards our bedding cuts, which are over there. The reveal is pointed in that pinch, basically, off to the west, as they either enter the plot from their bedding thickets or leave it to head back.
Yeah.
And he was on there pretty consistently. In fact, the day that I was able to harvest him, he was on there at 9:50 in the morning on a cold weather day in the late season. So he's not bedding far.
Yeah.
It's already almost 10 a.m.
Yes.
When by the time he gets his picture taken there, how far is he really going? Maybe.
And if they want to, with the way that ridge runs, there can be a little bit of south-facing exposure, but then there's great west-facing exposure there too. So whether it's midday, afternoon, we got short days of that time frame of the year. They're going to be in the sun, bedded in the sun on that ridge. So late season, and it's cold. I mean, it was single digits almost, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was cold.
Frame. Yeah, and the day leading up to this front, it was cold as well, but the pressure was not nearly as high. And the movement I saw, I rushed down on Christmas Day, got into the blind, and didn't have nearly the movement from one day to the next. Both decent weather days. The second day trumped the first one by far.
You can see that in the footage, though, too, just that almost okay, you got yearling bucks, you've got 2.5-year-olds, the 3.5-year-olds get on the field, and then it's like, all right, we're about to see some mature deer show up, and it's just that gradient of movement in age class just revealing themselves on the field.
Yeah, I think in an interview during the hunt, I talk to the camera and I say, I've seen yearlings, 2-year-olds, and 3-year-olds, and I don't really feel like I've seen 4, 5, and 6 yet. Although I am getting pictures to the Reveal app on my phone of one other mature deer on the same farm that is up.
Is moving.
And as soon as I got that picture of the mature deer that was up somewhere else, it wasn't minutes before here he came. So it's kind of interesting to see that correlation between the weather, they're all getting up at the same time.
If we look at the Onyx map, you look at obviously the blind setup, and you look at obviously the 3 or 2 circles of red of where we did the TSI work. And we've got a nice creek to the west of that as well. So once again, you can see us trying to pull this triangle effect again, right? Because we've got big grain fields to the northwest and to the west, and we've got our plot there right in the middle there. And so we're constantly trying to figure out the landscape of food, water, cover, all within a certain parameter. And once again, we've dialed this one in extremely well. It's quickly becoming, a high producer for deer activity, but a lot of transition stuff as well. And regardless if it's October 1st or December 25th in this case, this spot is going to be one of our high producing spots for years to come because it's just that good.
Let's address, if you will, the elephant in the room. The blind's in the middle of the field. How does that work, right? Is there enough roll in the terrain of that field to where you come in on the east side?
To point that out.
There's 2 reasons why it works. Yep. The number one reason why it works is we don't hunt it.
Okay. Very little.
Yeah. We hunt it once, twice.
Once the reveal cameras tell us, and when we have the right weather. I mean, it's usually less than 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the deer, we know that most of the deer, a lot of the deer come from the west, and they feed out of those bedding cuts, and they come right down the spine of that ridge, and they dump out.
Yep.
And then do they start to go to the northeast and funnel down that? So it's just like a big natural sweeping motion, and you guys get to the edge. I've referenced this before, but you get right to the edge and peek over the fence. Not a literal fence, but you get right to the edge and you're peeking in their backyard.
But Matt did point this out, though. Where that blind sits, there is a good roll.
It's
and it's real thick on those edges, and we left it thick so obviously we can get in and out.
Shingle oak, some cedar mix.
Yes.
You're not going to be bumping deer just off the timber, and you have the roll of the terrain from where they're bedded in the bedding thickets.
That's
Although
right.
they're close, there's no visual sight line.
Not at all. No, you come from the east side of that. Well, you southeast, walk that edge, and I literally, when I went into that blind, crawled on my hands and knees up to the edge of it, and then there's enough cover we've put in front of the blind on the bottom, so you just slink right up in there. They have no idea you're there.
And more often than not, we will sit past dark to leave this set.
Certainly.
And let them disperse and move off.
One thing I want to address, Matt mentioned it before, as far as the ability for a deer to leave based on terrain. When you look at these red globs, these bedding thickets, if we had done no habitat manipulation and we were just scouting a farm, I would totally anticipate to find beds in those locations based
100%.
on terrain. And the thing I wanted to add was when you have terrain features and you have thermals playing a big part, in the mornings or the evenings, there is a lot of swirling winds happening because in the mornings you have hot air rising and you still have cold air trying to fall. And in those areas, the wind swirls. So deer lays down, they can smell all things going on around them.
No doubt.
So we're taking areas that they already like to bed and we're encouraging them. Now we have good terrain and quality thick cover. So it's just like a no-brainer for them to choose to bed there. So you put that in close proximity to a bedding or a feeding area, and it's just like he stands up, walks in, and there he is. He's like, still stretching and scratching his back because he just rolled out of bed and he's already in the plot.
It's essentially you want to create the environment to where why would they bed anywhere else?
Yeah.
Like it is secure. You don't go in there. You don't bump it. They got wind to their advantage. The food is super close. Why would they do anything else? That's the perfect environment.
Food, water, cover.
And you slide right in when the time is right.
Add that together and you've got great security.
And low pressure.
Yeah.
And the deer was 8.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you should point out, too, like the green that we have on this map is a soybean field.
Yeah.
And we sowed in a fall annual food plot in a semi-horseshoe shape, which would then, the food plot architecture is what makes those deer really cut that corner and walk in front of the blind. The funny part is when they get to the mouth of that trail that dumps out into the food plot, they're probably 80, 85 yards, not in bow range, but they're already
that pinch,
dead.
Though, as it curves around, that pinch is, I think it's 44 or 47.
Yeah.
It's inside of 50.
Yes.
Perfect.
So, which is by design, right? Mm-hmm. So everything we try to lay this stuff out, we're always looking at what is the bow range capacity, and then we try to make sure that when they're moving through those transition zones and moving through the plot that, by the way, when they're coming through from the west and they're going to start moving to the north and northeast, guess what? That is a quartering away opportunity.
Bingo.
Yeah.
You said when they hit that spot, they hit that field, they're coming in, they're pretty much dead to rights, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I want to feel really confident on a layout scenario that if I see that deer, like you did, go back to bed and I know where he's bedding, he's dead that afternoon.
Yeah, there's
and you went into that. You went in there with confidence because, like, he's bedded right there. He's going to have to come back out.
He should.
He should, right?
He should.
And when you see that on reveal, being revealed to you, you're like, here we go. This it's operating
as confident as a man can be with a fair chase opportunity.
Exactly.
No doubt. Anything can go wrong. And in fact, during this hunt, all those deer were there feeding. They started to leave right about when I anticipated he would come, so there was some nervousness there. But I still had high anticipation. I felt like, because of the reveal, because of our setup, that he was going to show himself eventually, and he did, fortunately for me.
Absolutely did.
All right, we just gave away all the details of how this hunt went down, but check out the link to see it in real time.